Right, so I just made it to Stirling University. Just picked up my pass and all that sort of stuff. I'm just going to my accommodation now, but look at this place. This is what you call a university campus. Because mine's like a city centre, like 80s style building. This is like, it's really green, there's like rivers, there's mountains just over that way. Yeah man, this is going to be really good. Get myself settled, get me shirts and stuff unpacked, attend this first talk, and then I'm going to explore this place because it looks incredible. Look at those mountains. Well, hills I guess. Yeah, so I'm just on my way to the conference. Yesterday's lectures were really cool. I mean, just very briefly, there was discussion about how progesterone pills increase a female's sexual satisfaction with her partner, decrease her sexual attraction to external males, and reduce the likelihood of infidelity. Also some really cool talk about how skin tone affects attractiveness. So like slight yellowing and slight redding make you appear more attractive, and you can gain this through fitness. Fitness, food consumption, low body fat levels. Really interesting. People think I'm crazy talking to a camera. Yeah, anyway, some of the other stuff. Yeah, there was this really interesting study where they had a massive data sample from all around the world, looking at how certain attributes affected female mate selection. Like, one of them was how well prospective kin got on, and it was a really important factor in long-term mate selection. And he presented this really cool data, and one of the other interesting things that came out of that is like marriage ceremonies, whatever the variation on the format is, are almost ubiquitous across the world. So only in these like really small cultures do marriage ceremonies not exist. So like, it seems when you look at the data that the purpose of these marriage ceremonies is essentially to bring together like the families. I mean, how better do you get large groups of people to socialise other than through alcohol, food and music, which are like common traits across almost all marriages. So really interesting stuff. A couple of the other like interesting things that were talked about. One was about like how you can predict like the way someone's gonna vote dependent upon the political climate, so whether you're at war or you're in a peacetime, and the attractiveness and masculinity of the face, which is really interesting. How predictable we are and all this sort of stuff. You hear all the time people talking about their preferences. So, I prefer blondes, or I prefer like tall, dark and handsome and all that sort of stuff. Now, when you compare that to their actual mate choices, it doesn't seem to tally up very well. But what you can actually do is you can actually compare it to their actual preference, not just their choices. For example, in this one particular study, they got women to state what their preferences were. So whether they liked blondes or they disliked blondes, and then they got them to rate um, how they thought their preference for that was compared to the rest of the population. And basically, when you test that against how they actually rate photographs, then in almost all instances, in fact, it might have been all instances that were studied, all traits that they talked about at least, there was no correlation, no relationship between their state of preference and how they actually rated photographs. Right, so I just got finished with this morning's half of the talks. Been some really interesting stuff. I just wanted to briefly talk a little bit about some of the research that's been discussed. And I'll start with the plenary talk from this morning by Dib Perrott. If you don't know who he is, it's really worth looking at some of his research. It's brilliant. He's got a really good team behind him as well. But basically he was talking about biological cues to health. So face shape and skin colour as things which affect judgments of facial attractiveness. Now a little bit of background. In some animal species, carotenoid pigments, so they're like yellows or red colours in the skin or feathers, are selected for by females. Now they are selected because only high quality males are able to maintain the most vivid displays. So effectively they are signals to other females that the male is of decent quality and is therefore worth mating with. Now there's been some research in humans recently which looks into this, and it's found some really interesting results. So for example, redness in the skin, specifically redness from oxygenated blood, is considered more attractive. So deoxygenated blood has a very slightly different pigment than oxygenated blood, and that's not considered attractive. So within a range of redness, there's a sort of centre point where slightly red but not too red is considered attractive, and white or really red is considered unattractive. And believe it or not, yellow colour in skin is considered attractive as well. Physically fit people produce their own sort of inbuilt antioxidants. Now, when you consume vegetables, essentially one of the sources of carotenoids, normally those resources are used to maintain bodily functions, but when you're physically fit and your body's producing its own antioxidants and its own beneficial chemicals, some birds fighting outside. These free carotenoids can affect skin pigmentation, and yellowness actually does affect judgments of attractiveness. Another thing which affects facial attractiveness is fat deposition. Now, judgments of facial fatness don't necessarily correlate to BMI. BMI is a bit of a dodgy measure for all of that sort of stuff, but what it does correlate with is visceral fat. Now the connection between facial deposition of fat and visceral fat isn't, as far as I'm aware, yet fully understood, but there is a link there. So judgments of facial fat, given that visceral fat's quite unhealthy, it's a good judgment to use for attractiveness. And what you find is that people who tend to have facial deposition of fat
have greater oxidative stress. They tend to have more illnesses across a lifetime. The carotenoids, which would normally be stored in the skin or really visible in healthy people, is actually stored in fat cells, so it's not as visible. So there's slightly less yellowing of the skin, and also facial fatness correlates with decreased fitness levels as well. So that is a thing which affects judgments of attractiveness as well, or at least facial attractiveness.